All right, well, welcome everyone to another evening of spiritual science as social activism and self-initiation, or SASSY for short. Yeah. Here we are in the beginning of April, and tonight's talk is, of course, dealing with your dark side before you die. And have fun doing it. Yeah. So, but before we get into that, I know you're all keen to dive into the dark side. That's kind of good. It's kind of good. I thought I'd just do a mini recap of how we arrived here from the beginning of 2016, because we've done a couple of triplet talks. We started back in January with a talk that was called Spiritual Evolution, the Origin of the Cosmos. And we compared the scientific model of the origin of the cosmos, like the Big Bang and things like that, compared to some of the esoteric teachings regarding a spiritual evolution, namely one that's read by Rudolf Steiner from the Akashic Record, where things began as a great warmth of spiritual beingness. Matter of fact, you could say it's not only spiritual beingness, but it was spiritual beings that were the origin of the cosmos that has come into manifestation as we know it. So that started things off in the beginning of the year, and then we moved on to a talk called The Campaign for Consciousness, from sentient life to epochal civilizations to future challenges. And we looked how really the main thrust and impulse behind all this crazy madness that we're in is this campaign for consciousness. It's that model that we were working with, how the artisanship of the cosmos is engendering self-aware, self-directed, free will beings who from a wisdom center live a life of love and service. And that really is kind of the end game of consciousness. Of course, science doesn't really look at there being an end game, but within spiritual science, we see that there is time that is going back into the past, but there's also time coming from the future. And there is, in fact, an end game for our planet, for our cosmos, just as there is for a plant. You look at a plant, and it is a living organism that has stages of growth from beginning, step by step, to a blooming. Likewise, our planet within this planetary system also is growing through stages and will come to a blooming. Not just a physical blooming, but a blooming of consciousness. And we can see that in our own lives, that there is this development of consciousness from the beginnings of sentient life on this planet, right through the epochal civilizations, through time, the great rising and falling of civilizations, each contributing in some way to the development of consciousness upon this planet. Each civilization kind of taking a different angle on things. For some civilizations, some things were more important than others. Some civilizations weren't really concerned with the idea of reincarnation. It wasn't something that was a compelling, driving, philosophical idea. Whereas other civilizations, it was completely about this idea of reincarnation. Everything revolved around that central concept. And then looking into the future, the challenges that we face that will require further development of consciousness. We cannot face the challenges coming from the future with old tools. So we really are at a critical time right now of birthing other aspects of consciousness. Then we got into the third of that first triplet of talks, looking at the spiritual hierarchy, or the spiritual holarchy, as I'm starting to call it more and more, so it's not such a hierarchical thing, but the spiritual beings that accompany us, the spiritual beings that have been with us from the beginning in our development, and in fact are developing in us. Not only are other beings helping in our development, but they are developing in us. Some of them have gone before us in kind of a linear time thing. They've been going down this road of consciousness before us, and in some views we are the 10th of hierarchy of beings that's evolving, and in some ways they're ahead of us, but in other ways we have aspects of development that they don't have. So there's really this partnership with other beings that we're engaged with. Not all invisible, mind you, because we do see ourselves in partnership with the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the mineral kingdom, even friendly bacteria. So that's the visible realm of things. Behind the visible realm is an invisible realm, and we're partnering with other beings that we don't see with the senses. Our senses are developed for engaging with the senses realm, and our brain takes in this, the senses information. But we have other senses. Matter of fact, we have a total of 12 senses, and some of them are more toward the invisible realm, to engage with these higher beings, and that's part of the development of consciousness that we're facing at this time. Then we got into a talk called Lifting the Veil on Mental Illness from a spiritual scientific perspective. And one of the central themes that came out of that was this idea of the threshold, that there is a threshold between the senses realm and the spiritual realm. And that threshold is different for everybody depending on where you are in your development of consciousness. But a lot of the anomalies we see in the development of human behavior and whatnot, and what we call illness and whatnot, is really all part of this movement forward in consciousness, trying to expand our consciousness beyond that threshold between the visible realm and the invisible realm. And that's a slippery slope, and that's where people get into difficulties in terms of their soul health and so forth. And so that was a really interesting evening, looking at mental illness and really, the gifts that are inherent in that when we start to look at it from a spiritual perspective and see what's going on there and how we can support it more with spiritual medicine rather than just the physical allopathic medicine that is available to people. Then we got into another triplet of talks. The first one was called Getting Clear on Karma, Old and New Perspectives. And yeah, we started from the beginning in January, the big picture about creation and consciousness and the spiritual beings that guide us. And then it's like, okay, well, now that we see that and we're here within this context, the game we're playing here, what's it about? Well, it's about karma. It's about working with that balance sheet of, you could say, the good and bad deeds that we've done in the past lives. We saw that it's not necessarily just black and white like that it's really about nature trying to move us forward and keep us in balance, but we're always kind of out of balance. So in the actual deeds, the moral deeds that we do, we're kind of a little off center, and that's what karma is about. It's really our wise teacher, as we began to look at it. It's the wise teacher. It's the one that's sort of the guru of the future that's going to guide us when we learn to develop our karmic radar and to be able to hear the karmic word within the circumstances of our lives. That radar, that hearing, inner hearing, is going to be the guide in knowing what it is we need to do in any kind of circumstance. I was spending some time with Pavel earlier this evening, and we were talking about, making those life decisions is the hardest thing. It's nice when you find work to do and you do it, but it's like making the decision of what are you going to do, where are you going to plug in, how are you going to invest your energy. That's the most difficult thing. And this is where the development of consciousness is really key, and that's all hinging on our karma. So really being able to determine in any kind of circumstance, what's going on here? Like, how can I work with this situation that's going to forward me in terms of my karmic development? And then the talk following that was called Between Death and Rebirth, the unseen side of reincarnation. And we saw how this journey after death is really quite geometric in a way, and mirrored in the journey we have when we're born. So we started actually looking at the journey when we're born and how it goes through stages of development. And when you're born, first stage, 7 years up to the change of teeth, it's all about building up your physical body. Physical development. You never develop more physically than you do in your first 7 years. And then in the second 7 years, it's the development of the etheric body, the life force. In the third set of 7 years, 14 to 21, when you hit puberty, it's the most development about your astral body, your personality, your psychology, so forth. So it's getting those bodies together so then the ego self has something to incarnate in, and boom, you're out of the barn and into life and working with your karma. So the mirror of that, when you die, is the first step is the disintegration of the physical body, which happens actually before you die. There's this decline bit by bit. And then when you leave your physical body, then it's the time for the etheric body to die. And that's a process that can last from a few weeks to a few months. The life force, which is the body that has the imprints of your memory and experiences, unravels. And it's similar to what people have when they have a near-death experience. They see their entire life in one tableau, in one grand picture. If you've ever had a near-death experience or maybe a psychedelic experience, you have these flashes of your whole life before you. So that's the second stage of death, this etheric death. And then following that, you could say it's time for the astral body to die, and that's what takes place in Kamaloka. The Kamaloka means the place of desire, where you experience your desires, your unrequited desires, and you look at your insides as if they're outside. You know, if you're out in a forest and you're looking around the forest, you saw all the trees around you. Well, when you're Kamaloka and you're looking out from your center, you're actually seeing your insides on the outside around you. So, yes, that journey between death and rebirth. And yeah, after Kamaloka was the Devakan, where the lower Devakan, where you experience the archetypes. Those are the things that you were connected to, the things you plugged into while you were alive. You experience them visually and in a spiritual sensory way on the outside of you. And then on Upper Devakan, you actually experience the beings behind the archetypes, the beings themselves, the higher beings, because everything is made up of spiritual beings. And so as you come up towards this midnight hour on the journey after death, you're really in that pure state of spiritual beings, but you're not necessarily conscious of them. The ability to remain conscious at that high point after death has to be developed while you're here alive on Earth. Otherwise, you just kind of sleep through the afterlife and then back down into a new life. So, where did that bring us? That brought us back to Bozo. Good old Bozo. Who is our central feature tonight as we look at dealing with the dark side before we die and having fun with it. So, yeah, who is Bozo? Well, you is Bozo. I am Bozo. We're all Bozo. And as a matter of fact, this Saturday night, I'm having a lofty gathering here, a party, lots of music and entertainment and whatnot, which is called Everybody's Bozo. And we're going to celebrate that inner Bozo. And at that time, if you're here, I'm going to read my open letter to Donald Trump. Yeah, called Donald Trump, America's Bozo. And I'm serious about it. It's not any slight against him. It's the fact that, you know, even nations have their own karma, right? And bozo really represents the karma of people. Sometimes the hidden side that comes out and makes us look like a bozo because we're not dealing with our karma. And so, yeah, countries, nations, ethnicities, whatnot, these things happen in the senses realm, in the cultural realm, as a manifestation of the will of the people. And there's obviously a will in America for someone like Donald Trump to be their leader. So they produced this gentleman, Donald Trump, as a manifestation of their own bozo, their own karma, the conscious, unconscious aspects of themselves. So, yeah, I'm going to be reading my letter to Donald Trump, the bozo of America. Now, coming to looking at this dark side, you notice that bozo here, he's kind of dressed cool tonight. I mean, put on a hat to be warm, but we also put on hats to look cool, right? That's sort of the irony. I don't know what he's got under there. Maybe he's got dreadlocks or something like that. Because I was thinking, how bozo is sometimes a manifestation of our attempts to be cool, right? And a few years ago, I was working on a song. I didn't finish it, but I should finish it. It was called "This Culture of Cool is Killing Me," right? Because, sometimes there's so much pressure to stay up with the cool. And people will do stuff to be cool that will harm themselves. It'll get them in jail. It'll get them in trouble, and it'll get their bozo to spring out. So the first rule about cool, right, bozo? First rule about cool is you can't try to be cool. If you're trying to be cool, you're not cool, right? Trying to be cool and being cool is miles apart. You can't just try to be cool. Because, if you're trying to fool people into thinking you're cool, you're not being cool, you're just trying to fool them into being cool. So are you cool? No, you're a fool. Instead of cooling them, you're fooling them. So, it's interesting, there's this one letter difference between being cool and being a fool. So, yeah, this whole thing around cool culture is interesting to study. One could maybe say it started back with the man himself, Miles Davis, right? Back in the late 40s, he was coming out as this trumpeter. But he couldn't keep up with the likes of trumpeters like Dizzy Gillespie, who were just playing so hot, so fast, and just blowing it out. I actually got to see Dizzy Gillespie live once. It was amazing. And, anybody else see Dizzy Gillespie live? He just could blast that trumpet, his whole neck would just bubble out like a bullfrog. But Miles Davis, he couldn't play like that. Miles Davis didn't have the embouchure or, that kind of skill, so he just played the way he could play. He was just himself. He just started playing kind of more understated, low-key, slower, and Count Basie heard him and went, "Oh, that's cool. That's laid back. Oh yeah, this is a different style. Miles Davis, he's got something different going on here." And that was kind of one of the benchmarks in the birth of cool. Matter of fact, now you can go buy a box set about Miles Davis called The Birth of the Cool. But unfortunately, when things start to get commercialized, Pepsi and Coke are doing that all the time. They're trying to commercialize cool. It's over, that cool's over when it becomes commercialized. So, but it's interesting how that word cool has endured as an adjective, I think, beyond any other expletive, for something that's, it's been over half a century, at least. It's endured beyond cat's meow, or groovy, or gnarly, or wicked, or totally bitchin', even awesome. It's outlived awesome. This word cool. So it's become like this. The ideal is still to be cool, but that wasn't always the ideal, right? So the problem is when you try to be cool, sometimes you end up being a fool. I know for myself, when I've tried to be cool, it turns into a big fail. Like, I remember I was in Mexico, and I was playing tennis with this woman, and I tried jumping over the net. I went up, I landed right on my side. Oh my gosh. Couldn't dance that night. Couldn't dance the next night. I was hobbling around for weeks. I still have it to remind me here, this pain in my hip, that, trying to be the big cool can be a big fail. I end up looking like a bozo, right? So, I'm just giving you that piece of advice on dealing with the dark side and have fun with it, right? I think the new cool is be yourself and be humble. To remember that sage advice from the Proverbs that said, those who exalt themselves shall be humbled, but those that humble themselves shall be exalted. Right? So, if you're willing to go down and bow and descend into the depths, descend down in the pit, you're going to be exalted for that. Like in the hero's journey, the hero who goes down and descends first and then comes up. But them that try to exalt themselves, they're going to be bozo. So, yeah, I think the new cool is being yourself, being humble. And when I say be humble, what does that mean? It means a lot of different things. I like the fact that the word humble comes from the same root as humus. Humus is like the lowest growth on the earth. That we have to bring ourselves down to the earth and connect to that. To be self-effacing, to admit our errors and failures with courage. I don't think it's that overly polite thing that Canadians get sometimes accused of. Like Canadians thought like they're so polite that even when they bump into furniture, they apologize. No. That's going too far. Speaking of cool, got to show you my new t-shirt. Yeah. David Gilmour. Yeah.
He's pretty cool.
I saw the man live in concert last week. Yeah. So, of course, I had to get the t-shirt to show everybody how cool I am. But, I just tripped on over to the ACC by myself. Didn't have a ticket. Thought, I'm just going to hit on one of those scalpers. So, yeah, I did. I got a scalp ticket for less than the price of the ticket. Yeah. Couldn't believe it when I walked through the gate and the little thing beeped. It was like, oh yeah, I'm in. I got a $150 ticket for $100. Yeah, so I went up and found my seat. It was like 19 rows back from the floor, looking directly at the stage. Talked to the guy 2 seats over, and I said, oh yeah, did you get a ticket? How much you paid for your ticket? He paid $250 for a $150 ticket from some online scalper. I'm thinking, hey, I'm pretty cool. Like, this is really cool. Then some guy comes in a little bit later. He sits down next to me, and I thought, oh, you got the ticket from the same scalper, right? Yeah. Like, how much did you pay for your ticket? You paid $50 for a $150 ticket. So my cool meter kind of went down a little bit. And that's another point, When it comes to assessing ourselves, where we are, it's not like how cool we are, and we shouldn't necessarily compare. So I got my ticket for less than the guy over there who paid $250, but I paid more for the guy next to me who paid $50. So really, in life, it's not so much about comparing ourselves. It's really about sharing. Don't compare, but share. Share your experience. And then all of us can share in the wisdom. All of us can learn from our experiences and even our mistakes. Because if we're into comparing ourselves, that can be a trap of the ego where, like you can overinflate because you go, oh, well, I paid less than that guy. And then you talk to somebody else that's like, oh, I paid more, and then your ego shrinks. So it's a trap when we compare ourselves with others. There's a better way. There's a safer way to self-assess where you are in working karmically and developing your stuff. Because when you compare, that's as stupid as that story about the two gurus arguing over who has overcome their ego the most. So anyways, yeah. David Gilmour, I thought it was a cool t-shirt. It says Rattle That Lock, which is the name of his album, new album, and name of his tour. And I got the box set with all the goodies, the DVD. It even came with a copy of Paradise Lost, Volume 2, which of course is Milton's writing about humanity falling from paradise and into this dark realm of things. And it really is about the dark side. And I'll read you the lyrics from the song. Whatever it takes to break, got to do it. From the burning lake to the eastern gate, you'll get through it. Rattle that lock, lose those chains. Rattle that lock, lose those chains. Let's go do it. Go back to where we blew it and lost our heads along the way. So long sin. Au revoir, chaos. The fallen angels in disguise. No discord is going to interrupt this bliss. Rattle that lock. Lose those chains. So yeah, it's a beautiful image in this song and in this album about breaking away, from Paradise Lost, breaking away from the limitations of the senses realm, breaking away from this paradigm of the materialistic science that we're living in. And that's going to be the talk coming up in 2 weeks called Free Your Mind from the Matrix, referencing Rupert Sheldrake's work on setting science free from scientific dogma. So we're going to be looking at the scientific dogma and the assumptions that science has, things that aren't necessarily proven, but they become assumptions and they be taught in our schools at all levels. And it's very materialistic. And it informs our healthcare and our economic systems and our agriculture, and basically every aspect of our culture is being informed by the predominant scientific model. And so we got to rattle that lock, loose the chains on our minds and on our perspectives, including what science has done. So, yeah, delving into the dark side. Of course, talking about the dark side, and David Gilmour, who is the lead guitarist from Pink Floyd, we cannot help but mention Dark Side of the Moon, one of the top-selling albums of all time. And of course, the punchline on that album, who hasn't heard that album? Good. Everybody's heard the album. The punchline of that album, when you get to the very end, the last song, very end of the last song, you hear the words, "There is no dark side of the moon. Actually, it's all dark." So one of the top-selling albums, Dark Side of the Moon, there is no dark side of the moon. It's all dark. Of course, the moon doesn't give off light, right? The moon light that we see is sunlight. There's actually sunlight that's reflecting off of the moon's surface. But it's and actually both sides of the moon receive sunlight. The only thing is that we don't see both sides of the moon. We only see the same face of the moon all the time. But with the rotation of the Earth around the sun does actually shine on the unseen side of the moon. The Pink Floyd album should have actually been called The Unseen Side of the Moon. But I guess it's just not as sexy as the dark side of the moon, because we do have a dark side fascination, and rightly so. We should be fascinated with the dark side. But it's really the unseen side of the moon. And that side of the moon was never seen until, I guess it was the 60s, when they sent up a spaceship that was able to fly around to the other side of the moon, the unseen side of the moon, take pictures. The Earth lost contact with the spaceship when it was on the far side of the moon, but when it came out again from that side, it was able to transmit these pictures, and we had our first view of the unseen side of the moon, and of course everybody went, "Oh my God, it's not dark. There's the dark side of the moon on the other side of the moon." It was light. But that's an interesting analogy there, because that's exactly what we as humans need to be able to do. And we are doing that. We're needing to shift our perceptual position from Earth-centric, self-centric, where we only see things from one angle, to be able to move out, like those astronauts did in the spaceship, and to travel to the unseen side of things. It's a fantastic analogy. We really need to develop the perceptual shifting to be able to see the unseen side of things. And that's going to the dark side, or the unseen side. And of course, that's inherent in human development, is this calling to be able to shift your perceptual position. When a child is born, it's very initially it doesn't have any point of reference other than the mother's face and the mother's breast, but then it slowly develops a sense of self, and by the time it's 2, it's all I, me, mine, I, me, mine, 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 I, me. Becomes very dramatically self-referencing. And some people think, this is the terrible twos, because this self-centered little brat, just wants to hold on to its own toys. But in fact, it's a very important survival imperative that people develop this self-referencing center. That you have this self-referencing center, because later in life you're going to need that as an adult when you leave the confines of your parents' domain, their walls and their roof, and you go out into the wider world, that you can have a sense of your own boundaries, not only physically, but on every other level, emotionally, energetically, mentally, spiritually. So in the beginning, we need to lock in this self-referencing center, but then as we develop different aspects of consciousness through adolescence and teens, and then become an adult in our 20s, we need to be able to step out of that center. Otherwise, we're in danger of, having to rattle the lock, loose the chains on our own egotism. So it's the antidote to egotism is this thing called empathy, where you can move beyond your own center into another center of reference. You can see something from another person's perspective. You can see yourself from another person's perspective. You can ask that person, tell me what you think of me. Mirror back to me. So it's very important that we develop that fluidity within, the circle of our own domain, to go from the center out to the circumference, and to look at ourselves from out there, to look at ourselves from other people's perspectives. And that's called objective consciousness. And that's really the strength of science. Science has been developing this thing called objectivity, where I'm not going to be, in an objective scientific experiment, you take yourself out of the equation. You try to do it in a sterile lab, so you're not influencing. It's not what you want it to be. It's going to be, what it is. And that's great. Science has developed that that strength that it brings to human consciousness. The problem now, as we'll see with Rupert Sheldrake, is we need to evolve science further. Science has kind of got stuck. It has to loose the chains on its own self-imposed limitations with this very materialistic and defined methodology that doesn't allow other ways of accessing knowledge. Right? With that book I lent you on, called Intuitive Thinking as a Spiritual Path, that there are other ways than just reason and intellectualization of things. And so we need to rebirth something you might call a qualitative, subjective approach to phenomenon as well. It's great. We've got objective consciousness, quantitative science, but we also need to have a subjective approach where we can measure qualitative things. Because, you could measure this room and say it's this high and this long and these things weigh this much, but there's also a quality to this room. People come in here and they go, oh wow, this feels different in here. And it's something that the human is experiencing. They're not coming in with some sort of meter that goes, oh yeah, this room feels lovey and warmy and cozy. No, it's something that the soul of the human is able to register, and we need to bring that back. And that's what we're going to be getting into with the next 3 talks coming up, starting with the one on Rupert Sheldrake, and then we get into the gospel according to nature, and developing our spiritual literacy through encounters with nature. I'm really looking forward to the stuff that's coming up because it's going to be, applied spiritual science. So far it's been more developing terminology and concepts and the big picture, but now it's like coming into the world as scientists of the spirit and realizing we can encounter spirit through matter. We can encounter spirit through nature. It's there. As Goethe said, he called it nature's open secret. Nature has open secrets, but they're locked. They're locked up. And the only way to unlock nature's secrets is to unlock things within yourself. The unlocking comes from within yourself, and then things in nature about the spiritual ways of working, spiritual principles, the spiritual world will be revealed. So I'm very excited about the next 3 talks coming up on that line. We'll be doing exercises with that. Okay, so back to the dark side. I'd like to talk a bit about me, my shadow, and I, and my own dealing with the dark side, which I had quite an interest in from early on. You could say in my teens, while sitting, listening to albums like Dark Side of the Moon, probably stoned at the time, and contemplating these ideas about, dark side, There's a lot of intrigue in the dark side in rock music, for one. When you think about, I also was a fan of 21st Century Schizoid Man by King Crimson, or that song called Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones. Even Hotel California, it's all about the dark side, the shadow side. Highway to Hell. Maybe you can think of some other songs that, even in opera. Opera certainly has its intrigue with the dark side. Do you have any...
Opera? Well, opera's a tough one.
Opera, rock... Faust, of course! Yes. Faustus and Mephistopheles. That's great. Written by Goethe. Any other songs, albums come to mind? Well, maybe you'll think of some more along the way. But, somewhere at that time, in late teens, I was really searching spiritually, and somehow I came across the 12-step program. I wasn't, an alcoholic or dealing with an addiction of any kind, but I saw that there was actually someone who had formulated a program for dealing with the dark side, the addictive side, the side that wants to take you down. And in the 12-step program, there's a few steps here that I found quite interesting. One is make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Who wants to take that on? Okay? A searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Admit to God and ourselves and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Whoa, anybody gone down that road? Then, make a list of all persons we have harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. Whoa. Make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. That's action. That's karma. Karma is action. And then finally, continue to take personal inventory, and when we are wrong, promptly admit it. Whoa, who's on top of that one? So I got an encounter with this like around age 20, and I started binging. Not on alcohol or drugs. I started binging on apologizing. I was going around like finding everybody I could apologize to and make amends to. It was like, okay, if I got karma and I've done stuff wrong, like, let's get on with it, like, who can I apologize to now? It's like, I became obnoxious, actually, going around to my sisters, and it's like, oh, I remember I was beating up on you, and I was like 5 years old, and I was scaring you and trapped you in the closet, and like, it was kind of hilarious. But, I just took it on as a spiritual practice, like, okay, let's do this, like, what can I do to make up for the things of the past so I can be better prepared for the future? And of course, as we learned last time, better prepared for your post-life experience when you die. So, let's look a bit at ways to work with your dark side. Just going to go through some different approaches, and I'll mention right now that I'm developing an idea for next year which I call Spiritual Boot Camp. And that's going to be a program that's going to run from September through to the end of April. It's going to be like a weekly meeting for people who really want to up their game. They really want to up their spiritual practice. They want to get more committed to certain practices, and they want to be involved in a circle, so they're held more accountable, and they're just held. And within the boot camp, there's basically 3 legs to it. The one leg is working with a program called Jewel in the Lotus. The Jewel in the Lotus is a Kriya Tantric program with 12 lessons, and I've been doing that this year with a group of people here, meeting regularly. And you don't have to be in a partnership with anyone to learn these tantric practices, because in the physical aspect of things, there's red tantra and there's white tantra. And white tantra is like a non-sensual type of tantric practice, but the real heart and soul of tantra is really the cycle of spiritual development, to clear the blockages, to activate the chakras, so you can achieve higher consciousness. That's the end game of the tantric work, but it's through the activation of the flows, the meridians, the chakras, and so forth. It's a fantastic course. I wish I had learned this years ago, and very happy to learn it now. So that's one aspect of the spiritual boot camp. And then the second aspect is working in dyads, a dyad network where you learn to facilitate each other in processing your own stuff, your own soul substance. So you learn skills to facilitate, to communicate, to mediate, working in pairs, and you'll be meeting with people. You'll be doing dyad swaps each week on your own to learn and practice these skills, as well as process stuff that's coming up for you. And then the third leg of the spiritual boot camp is the spiritual science, the stuff that we're doing now, because this is going to continue next year with these talks, which people can come to live or they can watch on YouTube videos. So, working with your dark side, shadow side, your bozo side, is, first of all, people. people around you. I mean, it's pretty handy. There's people around, and people can give you feedback. People can mirror to you things about yourself. And that's done in the professional realm. You know, if you work for a company, you get evaluated, you get feedback from your manager and so forth, every so often, reflecting to you how you're doing. And so within a dyad network, working with people, you can receive feedback and mirroring. The thing with this is the feedback is filtered through another human being, which is both good and bad, because the mirroring from another person may not be entirely accurate. You know, it's subjective based on their experience of you. So it may not be entirely accurate, but it's good in that the sense you have to develop your own radar. You have to develop your own resonance to go, well, yeah, what you're saying kind of fits here, but it doesn't fit there. I think maybe you're projecting something on me. So you have to sift and sort through when you're trying to assess your own unconscious nature through other people. Then there's dream work. You know, dreams are unfiltered, as opposed to stuff coming from people, which is filtered. Your dreams are unfiltered. It's just coming directly from your unconscious mind and these dream images. And the problem with dream work is, you know, how to interpret them and how to determine whether there's really anything of significance in them. Because some of what comes up into our dream life in the middle of the night is really just bodily activity. Yeah, like our organs and our organ processes have psychic activity to them, which can be expressed visually in the dream state. So not all dreams are necessarily, you know, messages from God, so to speak, telling you, you know, omens about your future. It's just might have been the pizza that you had before you went to bed. You know, just kind of like going around in there and it's like, oh, geez, what was that all about? You know, like, how am I supposed to interpret that? So, you know, dreams are, you know, a slippery slope in terms of accessing information about our unseen side. And I'll get a bit more into that in the talk coming up in May called The Heart is Not a Pump and Other Physical Mysteries, the esoteric backstory on physiology. Yeah, we're going to look at the esoteric nature of our physical makeup. You know, how do we come to be in this kind of form? It's very, very interesting. Another approach to accessing the unseen side is hypnosis. And there again, it's unfiltered, because it's kind of like going to sleep and you get that mind out of the way, that discursive mind is gone, and you have the hypnotist who's guiding you and getting you to reveal things that you would maybe filter yourself with your conscious mind. But the thing with hypnosis, similar to sleep, is that you're losing consciousness. You're not entirely present there. It's not exactly like channeling or trance mediumship, which is, you know, like Edgar Cayce. He was a trance mediumship where he would go unconscious and he would channel stuff through, and then afterwards people would have to tell him what he said. And same with hypnosis. You know, when you come out of the hypnotic state, you might have to be told what you were saying while you're under hypnosis. When you were channeling yourself, the unseen side of the self. Likewise, when you work with plant spirit medicine, such as ayahuasca, there's this unfiltered expression that comes through into that dream state. You might say it's an alchemical experience when you're working with the brew, the Amazonian brew. It's not only an alchemical thing, it's actually a chemical thing. You're putting a substance into your body that is altering the chemical state of your body for, you know, that period of time. And it's not only chemically altering your physical body, there's a dissolution of consciousness that takes place. There's a dissolving of your consciousness. As a matter of fact, there's a dissolving of the carrier of consciousness, which is the egoic self, right? The egoic self is the carrier of consciousness, and when you take plant spirit medicine, it actually dissolves you so something else can come in. You know, normally we want our consciousness to be at the center, you know, at the center of the being. You know, you want to be centered, as they say. And when you take plant spirit medicine, it dissolves you as the bearer of consciousness, so you actually move out to the periphery of yourself and you open the space. Why? You open the space so something else can come in, which is the plant spirit and whatever other spirits that the shaman is bringing in. They come in to your space. That's why they call it controlled possession. It's a form of controlled. Something else is possessing your space while you're dissolved out. And those spirits will take the contents of your mind, your conscious mind and your unconscious mind, and they throw it up against the astral space that you're in and show you things about yourself to teach you. You know, like the spirit there is essentially to teach you, maybe to scare you sacred. You know, it is in a way a near-death experience or a death experience. The name ayahuasca actually means the vine of the dead. It does take you into a death-like state. That's very characteristic of ayahuasca. Is you feel like you're dying. You might even feel like you're physically dying. I've seen that. But mostly it's an ego death, which is what happens when you die. You go through this purgatory. You go through Kamaloka. And so ayahuasca is taking you through that purging, that death, and actually giving you kind of a preview of what you're going to go through when you die. And that's why people are really kind of running to this medicine, is because like they want to see what's there in the unseen side so they can deal with it now. So with something like ayahuasca, you can actually learn to die before you die, so that you can hopefully live more while you're living. Then there's something else that you can work with called the Oz scope. And that's something I developed myself a number of years ago. And it's kind of a modern form of a shamanistic journey into the depths of yourself, but done more consciously than what you would do with plant spirit medicine. And I'm going to talk a bit about that. I'm going to talk a lot about it after the break, and we're actually going to do one. But I'll move to the next thing that you can use for accessing the dark side, and that is the Raksha backward daily review. And some of you that have been here at previous evenings, I explained this, and we did a little mini Raksha backward review, and I'm going to make a YouTube video of this and put it up on the channel on Spiritual Science, Social Activism, because it really is a powerful, conscious way of entering into the unseen side of yourself and getting accurate information. And I'll just again review what this is. At the end of the day, hopefully before you're not too tired, you sit down in a meditative state and you review the events of the day backwards. So starting with what you did just before you sat down, and what you did before that, and what you did before that, and you kind of dwell on the picture of each thing, so you can get not only the picture, but you get some feelings associated with it. And you go through this all the way back to the beginning of the day. And the reason you do it backwards is because that's what you do when you die. You review your life in reverse when you die. So this is a mini death. And sleep is a mini death anyways. So when you do this review, it's really gearing into this mini death thing. And you're also gearing into the spiritual beings that are connected to your higher self. Because when you remember it's a very spiritual cognitive activity. People don't realize how spiritual memory is, because when you remember something, you're going to see it differently. You're going to see additional things. You're going to see it from a different perspective. And those perspectives are being given to you from your higher self and from the higher beings, your guardian angel or whatever you want to call it, that work with you. So when you create that space on a daily basis, you're really downloading through this remembering perspectives on yourself that you're not going to have otherwise, because when you're in the event of the day, you're just in it. You're in the center. When you do the daily review, you are moving out to the periphery of the center and looking, go, oh, there's Jesse. Yeah, there's Jesse. He's getting on his bike. And then, oh, yeah, he almost hit that lady crossing the sidewalk. And, oh, and then he stopped and he talked to her. Oh, and yeah, she said some very interesting things. She told her about a concert that she's doing. It, like, you know, and you start to go, wow, like that seemed like it was bad, but it was actually good. Maybe I was supposed to almost hit her. You know, so you really get to see, for one thing, how guided you are by circumstances in the world. The circumstances are really your karma working for you. So that's the Rukshal daily review, or I like to call it the Insider's Report. Then there is the Karmic Insight exercise, which we have worked with the last two talks here. Again, another Rudolf Steiner exercise, and that one is up on YouTube right now for you to look at. Did anybody work with that over the last 2 weeks that wants to share some of their experience? It's tough, isn't it? It's a job, and that's really the point of it, is you got to work it. You got to work it with real commitment. You got to really apply yourself. You got to really put your will into it to the point where you're like sweat and blood, practically, so that you transform the will into an organ of seeing. We have the brain as an organ of seeing out through the eyes into the senses realm. If we want to see into the spiritual world, it's the will part of the soul that has to be transformed. And it's not going to be transformed for us. These eyes were given to us, but a seeing will is not going to be given to us. We have to work at it. And so to do this the way the exercise says, you pick an event in your life, and you spend some time building up that picture, what it looked like, what it felt like, in as much detail as possible, so it's as clear as possible. And then you go to sleep and you take that image with you out of your body, because your ego self and your astral body leave your physical body every night. So you take that picture that you built when you're in your body, you cross the threshold, you take it out, it gets worked on in the spiritual world. The next day you bring it back and it lives in your astral body in a different way. You can feel it. Then you do the same thing the next night. You look at the picture, you build it up in clarity, detail. You leave your body, you take it into the night, it gets worked on. The next morning you bring it back, it's going to come in even deeper into your being. It's going to come into the etheric body, and you're going to feel it. It's going to be like, what's this in me? I feel like there's spiritual beings around me. The third night you do it again. You build up as clear as possible that picture. You take it into the night, it gets worked on, and on the fourth day you bring it back, and it comes right into the physical body, imprints on the blood and the nerves, and this effort is going to give a birth not only to seeingness within your will, part of your soul, but that picture is going to crack open like an egg with a revelation of karmic insight, of what karma you have with that person, what the nature of that karma is, what to do with it, and so on. You're not going to get this the first time. Steiner says, yeah, the thread's going to get broken after the first night or second night. You're going to have to keep doing this. it's a great exercise just to commit to for the rest of your life, because why are you here if not to work on your karma? So yeah, orient your life around putting efforts into this sort of thing, and you'll gain much fruit from it. I'll share a bit about my work with this exercise, because when I started doing this exercise a few weeks ago, I got this image of a young Asian boy sitting there eating rice from a bowl. He looked very peaceful, very nourished, very well taken care of, well dressed. And behind him there was a woman watching, holding the space. Probably his mother. Seemed like it was the presence of a mother next to a young boy. And I couldn't see the head of the mother. There was no face. It was just the heart area behind this boy. And I brought that image came through the first night, the second night, and I was asking, well, who is this person? You know, do I have karmic connection? And what came to me was I was the boy, and this woman, this mother there, is actually somebody I know in this community. Someone who I've been associating with for the past year or so. As I continued to work with the exercise, it didn't move. It just stayed stuck in my body. I could feel this, and it was like, okay, the next step is then to connect with this person, to start to unpack the karma and what we are to do. So I contacted her, but it took, because people are so busy, I wasn't able to get together with her until yesterday. Finally, we landed time to get together. But before she came over, in the morning, when I was coming back into my body, I came into this state that was very, very difficult, very, very heavy, very, very burdened. And the space had my mother, and she was like berating me for things that I didn't do, things I omitted to do, ways that I had treated her. It was a very heavy place. I just laid there for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes in this dream space. And as I started to wake up, I was going like, why am I in that? My mother died 5 years ago, and I've really worked through a lot of stuff around her, and I actually feel like I have a good connection with her on the other side. So it was kind of surprising that there was this son-mother thing. And then I realized the woman across the hall just died. Neighbor in the door across the hall, she just died, and her son is in there clearing out her stuff. And I was wondering if there was some of that energy spilling over, that, you know, like, because she's just fresh in the spiritual world and her son's going through stuff, and maybe there's some of that energy that I'm feeling splashing into my life, as well as, you know, connection with my mother. And then this woman arrived yesterday morning, and we sat in the space, and I shared with her the exercise I'd been doing and what had come through. And she, so we meditated together. We did a meditation, and she got the same image, a similar image to what I had got, you know, in Asia, hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago. And so, wow, like, that's huge. Like, I've potentially connected with someone who was my mother in a previous incarnation in some, you know, Asian country. But what's really the essence of it, the feeling around it, because as I said, when I was waking up yesterday morning, I was in this state of like, oh my gosh, I really have not served my mother to the best of my ability. Is that the karma now moving forward is that I need to work with her in helping, first of all, men to do the karmic work with their mother. whether the mother's alive or not is not the main thing. And I have a men's circle here bi-weekly, which all you men are welcome to come to. And this is something I'm going to be unpacking in that circle, is this relationship between the son and the mother. First of all, on a personal level, our personal mother, but then ultimately, Mother Earth, and how men need to come into a better association with Mother Earth in serving her. So yeah, this woman I met with yesterday, it's like we've got some karma, and she's going to support me in doing this, and we may end up doing some rituals. This really boils down to creating rituals to help with the development and clearing of our karma. So very excited about that. That's just one example of how this practice on karmic insight can produce fruit. Just before we take a break, I want to cover one more way, the how not to way of dealing with your dark side. And that comes from a story that I've been fascinated for years, that of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Anybody read The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Of course, Dr. Jekyll was this idealistic young doctor who wanted to rid the world of its dark side. He wanted to rid human nature of evil. But he was stymied in his work because the board of the mental health center would not allow him to work with patients who had mental illness issues. So this idealistic Dr. Jekyll decided to use himself as the lab rat with his own concoction to rid human nature of its evil and dark side. But, and this is a big but, this concoction, what it did was it actually created a dissociation between himself and his dark side rather than an integration. He was trying to separate and eliminate rather than transform and integrate. So what happens in the story is that he created what you might call an alter ego called Mr. Hyde, who then began going on these dissociated and autonomous rampages, doing every imaginable evil, raping, murdering, stealing, including murdering the board members that refused to give him help in doing his project. So what happened was this Mr. Hyde became so dissociated, so autonomous, that he would then come out without even Dr. Jekyll taking the concoction. It just became that powerful. And in the end, the only way that Dr. Jekyll could deal with his dark side was to kill himself. He had to commit suicide to put an end to these rampages of evil. So this is the how not to way of doing it, to repress and dissociate and deny those parts of ourselves. Which is why I sometimes play a game with myself called Dr. Stewart and Mr. Wart, where Dr. Stewart is the part of me, that's idealistic and wants to do things good, but then Mr. Wart is that side of me, that's not so pretty, not so, clean and so forth. And I haven't necessarily murdered, stolen, and raped and defrauded people in this life as Mr. Wart, but I assume that I have done that in the past, that I've done all those things in past lives. So I live with that assumption in this life when I do things that I'm making up for murder and rape and theft and defrauding people and all those good things. And doing the karmic work. And that's not, just this last point here, really important. There's a big difference between doing karmic work and being a good person. People will say, well, I'm a good person, like I'm not really into spiritual stuff, but I'm a good person and I'm doing good. But that's not necessarily enough, and that may actually be dangerous. Because if you're saying, well, look at me, I'm a good person, I give to charity and stuff like that. You may be hiding from your Mr. Hyde behind this mask of, civility and social acceptability and pretension and stuff like that. And that's the danger. We buy into that mask that we create and say, well, I'm a good person. I don't really need to look into all this spiritual stuff and do karmic exercises. But at the meantime, we could be just creating a time bomb of denial and repression that could manifest as physical illness or God knows what, anything. When that repressed energy finally reaches a tipping point and it's got to come out in some way. So we're going to take a little break and then come back and do an Oz scope.
I mean, it's so amazing.
You mean cool? You think I'm cool?
The karmic work. Thank you, Jesse.
Humble, humble, humble. Humble pie. Yeah, I've eaten some humble pie, been down. I've descended a few times. Had some rough patches in my life. But every time you come up, again, you just seem to smell even more like roses. So, yeah, maybe you smell that eau de rose that's in my life. Yes, sir.
All right, so my question is about when we're walking around in everyday life and we notice a pattern or something that kind of smells like shadow, that's like getting in the way of, who we want to be or how we want to interact. Is there like a sort of, quick thing or something that we can do like in the moment to kind of snap out of that and evolve and be who we actually want to be?
Great question. Yeah, so you're out in the world and you smell something that smells like shadow, and you want to do something with it. You want to capitalize on that moment. And that's a great step right there, that you're aware of something, that you have your karmic radar on, and you're recognizing it in the circumstances, because that really is what you might call, what do they call it, the early warning system, when you see it in the circumstances. Because, yeah, our insides are projected out into the circumstances of our lives, and if we can read those circumstances, that's called biography work. Seeing the picture, biography is the picture of your life, and being able to interpret it. And we're going to get into this more in detail when we look at the Oz scope, because as in Oz, so in Kansas. But your question is, what can you do, like the quick fix, like, the McDonald's drive-through version of dealing with your karma and your shadow. It's a great question. I wish I had a great answer. Yeah, I like what Jim's saying there, that through objectivity, we dissipate the charge. You're talking about, you're feeling a charge around something, which can be coming from, some skara, from some energy gestalt within you that's wanting to act out. It's wanting to be expressed. And so Jim's saying, get a little distance, take a breath, don't act. And that gives, a moment for something else to come in to the space. One of my tricks when I'm with someone and they say something that I have antipathy towards or I disagree with, rather than immediately reacting and going, no, I have a practice of going, oh. And this oh is like the circle, right? You create a space, you shape a space into which something else can come then. Rather than like, no, you go, oh, and that allows the higher self, like Jim's saying, something else can intervene. And ideally, what can come into that space is a high virtue, which really all grows out of empathy. Empathy is like the root out of and empathy and compassion is the root out of which human virtue can emerge and bear fruit. And so in a situation like that, it's like to go into empathy mode towards the person, which is also just a service. To put yourself in a position of service to the other person. How can I serve this other person? And then it's not about you serving the shadow in you. You're transforming the shadow to do something that's altruistic and of service to the other. So you create that space, and then you allow something higher to come in to serve. So, because you don't want to repress it. That's where you get into trouble. You close one door, it just comes in the side door.
And one other thing, if I may add, it was great to take a pause and step back. That's great because it gives you that time to kind of encompass it and see how you can transform it, and also to give you a chance to see where is it originating from, where might it be, why are you feeling this, where is it stemming from. And then I've learned that any kind of bad vibes or smelly shadows or whatever are actually, I try to transform them to see like a teacher. What can I learn from this? Where is it coming from? What can I learn from it? And if it's like a personal thing, or if it's a situation with another person, or a group of people, to see where this anger, let's just say anger, is coming from, and what can I learn from.
So then, yeah, as Pavel's saying here, like now to get to the root of it, which is not necessarily the quick fix. That's kind of like, okay, now how can we really create a space and go in and have a look at what's informing these thoughts and feelings and actions, which brings us to the Oz scope. Ta-da. But I also did want to quickly just mention Carl Jung. Cannot forget the man Carl Jung, the late great psychoanalyst from Switzerland who had been a protege of Freud and then broke away to pioneer the development of depth psychology. And his version of that is often referred to as Jungian psychology, in which he speaks about the shadow side. I don't know if he coined that term, but when I first heard it, I always thought shadow side, woo, like sounds bad, sounds evil. But we need to get rid of that idea around the shadow side. It's not necessarily something that comes out as bad or evil or bozo. It only comes out and makes us look like a bozo when we're not being proactive in exploring it through things like depth psychology. And one of the tools of depth psychology is active imagination, to access the unconscious. Really, his form of psychology, if you put it in a nutshell, is about the relationship between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And so the shadow, it's not neither good or bad. When you think of your shadow, it just means, there's a light shining, and there is you, yourself, and between the light, and then the shadow is projected into the world. So our actions and whatnot is just like how the light coming from source hits us in whatever formation and character we're in, and then casts a shadow onto the world. It's neither good nor bad. It's just the expression of our psyche and unconscious mind into the world, and how the world answers that. So yes, definitely needed to make reference to him, because he has been a big influence in my studies and practice, and helped me in the development of this thing called the Oz scope, which is actually in a book that I wrote back, almost 20 years ago. It came out. And it started when I was doing the teacher training at the Waldorf, for the Waldorf School at the Rudolf Steiner Center, and within the curriculum learning about fairy tales as being psychological portraits. You know, stories and fables and whatnot are actually expressions of the human psyche through these funny little characters. And when I was sitting there learning the curriculum for the Waldorf School, I kept thinking of the Wizard of Oz and how it was such a fantastic and complete allegory for the spiritual journey with the 7 main characters of Dorothy. Dorothy is the central character, the protagonist of the story, but then around her is the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Lion, and also the Wicked Witch and the Not So Wonderful Wizard, and Glinda as kind of the higher self in the story. And when I finished my training, I worked part-time with children, but I continued working with adults as well, and I saw how using this fairy tale, The Wizard of Oz, was a great way to help them to contextualize the experiences in their life, giving a framework to things going on in their outer world, which I just, called Kansas. And say, oh, this is going on in your Kansas, eh? Well, this is archetypal. This fits within the storyline of The Wizard of Oz. And then bit by bit, I started to not only use it as a explanation, I asked people to go inside and bring up these characters using active imagination, this tool I just spoke of that Carl Jung pioneered. And I was flabbergasted to see how perfectly the imagery that came up from the unconscious mind paralleled what was going on in their outer life. And that's what Jung called synchronicity. Things going on outwardly have a direct correlation to what's going on inwardly and the way you're configured inwardly. So that launched me into using this tool and developing it into what I call the Oz scope, which is, as I said earlier, kind of a modern shamanistic journey into your innards, if I can put it that way. And we're going to do that tonight, just a little mini Oz scope, where you are going to get a snapshot of your shadow side, we won't call it the dark side, but we'll call it the unseen side of the moon within you, through this Oz scope journey, using the Oz characters as a way to scope out the way you're configured. And as I said, there's the 7 main characters, Dorothy as the self, and then the Scarecrow represents the thinking, right, because he was looking for his brain in the story. And you don't need to know all this ahead of time. You don't really need to know what these characters represent, but I'll just say quickly how the Scarecrow is the thinking capacity, the Tin Man is the feeling realm, and the Lion is the will part of the soul. And then this other triangle, we have the Wicked Witch, the Not So Wonderful Wizard, and Glinda, acting as kind of a spiritual triangle around which Dorothy has to orient herself in the development of her soul and self. So what we're going to do, if you just prepare yourself for a little meditation, guided journey into your own Oz. Yes, sir.
What do the 3 magical characters represent?
The 3 which?
The witches and the wizard.
Well, yeah, the Glinda is really, when you look at her in the story, she's like the higher self. The higher self doesn't interfere with the lower self. It's there in the background. If it needs to intervene in some way, as she did in the poppy field, she was able to make it snow, and that counteracted the spell of the Wicked Witch. So the higher self is kind of the initiator of the lower self, because you remember in Munchkin Land when Dorothy was starting out on her journey on the Yellow Brick Road, Glinda said, well, I think maybe you should go and try and find this Wizard of Oz. Maybe he can help you to get back to Kansas. Well, Glinda knew all along that the wizard wasn't going to help her. It was the journey that was going to initiate Dorothy. But the initiator doesn't tell the initiatee, the neophyte, what the journey is going to be like. They keep it, all veiled in state of mystery. And then you've got the Wicked Witch and the Not So Wonderful Wizard. Really are, one is light and one is dark. The one is levity and one is gravity. They represent all the dualities of life that we need to work with to form our individuality, right? The word individuality has the word duality in it. Individuality means not divided in two. But at the outset of the journey, Dorothy has to still reconcile these dualities, and this is a big part of Jungian psychology. You have to work with the light and the dark, the levity, the gravity, the hot, the cold, the clockwise, the counterclockwise, the masculine, the feminine. One is, the witch is feminine, the wizard is masculine. So the Yellow Brick Road is about walking down that road and embracing both parts of you, using your thinking capacity, your feeling capacity, and your willing capacity as your team to develop yourself as an individual. Does that help? If that doesn't help, you can always get a copy of the book and read it there. I reference both the original story by Frank Baum, who was a theosophist, by the way, so he was definitely had a spiritual orientation while he was birthing his little kid stories. And I also referenced the movie, which does add some interesting insights of its own. And the Ozscope we're going to do this evening is also explained in this book so that you could actually guide other people into their own Oz, which helps to explain why things are going on the way they are in Kansas. Like your question was like, where's this coming from in you? I smell shadow. I smell shadow out there, but it's all because of what's in your Oz. It's the way you're configured with your Tin Man, Lion, Scarecrow, Wicked Witch, Wizard, and so forth. So you're not going to be able to change the outer world. That's shadow boxing. If you're out there trying to manipulate and control the world, that'll just get you into trouble. You'll change the world when you change yourself inwardly. So what we're going to do tonight is a little Ozscope, which is going to give you a snapshot of how you are looking in terms of your characters. And as I said, this will be a mini one. So when I work with people one-to-one doing an Ozscope, as we were speaking of over the break, this can take 20 minutes, 30 minutes in that dream time state. And then afterwards, we take time to look at what came out of the unconscious and correlate that to what's going on in your outer life, in your Kansas. All right, so after those brief introductory remarks, I invite you to just relax, sit back, prepare for what will begin as a journey across the Rainbow Bridge. Just connecting with your breath to relax your body and to still your mind. Just allowing each breath to release tension. Each breath taking you a little bit more inward. moving in towards the land of Oz. And as you move inward, we're going to approach a rainbow bridge where you'll be met by a color. Let's see what's the first color at the rainbow bridge to greet you. Just be with that color, breathe with that color. Just bathe in whatever color is in your visual field. And as you move across the rainbow bridge, there may be a second color to greet you. Just relax into that color. Allow that color to bathe you. Feeling the qualities of that color working upon you. And feel that color bringing a transition as you cross this bridge. Then meeting a third color. What's the third color on the rainbow bridge? As you feel yourself moving across the bridge, preparing to enter your land of Oz. When you're ready, taking a step into your inner land of Oz to see what you might see. Is there an Oz character there to greet you? If you see an Oz character in this land of Oz, just look at the details. How does this character look and feel? Is there something this Oz character wants to say to you? Just take in everything you can about the land of Oz and whatever character is there. See if there's another Oz character that wants to come in to connect with the first Oz character. What's the dynamic between the Oz characters? happy, sad, angry, energetic, tired? How do they look? How do they feel? Just taking one more moment to see what wants to come in this land of Oz. And then preparing to leave the land of Oz, bringing back what you've seen, what you've heard. Turning your attention once again to the Rainbow Bridge. Saying goodbye to the land of Oz, going to the Rainbow Bridge to be met by a color. What's the first color to greet you and meet you coming back on the Rainbow Bridge? Moving across the bridge, see if there's a second color to escort you across. Being thankful for what you've seen and heard. Being thankful as you're guided back across the Rainbow Bridge. Being thankful for a third color to greet you. Bringing you back out of Oz into Kansas. The outer realm. It's beginning to feel your body sitting on the chair or floor. Feeling your hands, feeling your feet. Preparing to come back into waking consciousness. Being with your breath to bring yourself back. And when you're ready, opening your eyes. All right, welcome back from your trip to Oz. And we'd like to get a little sampling of people's experiences.
Sure. So, yeah, it was a nice little journey.
Okay. Nice and loud so people can hear.
Yes, it was a nice journey. It was first just trying to imagine the bridge, and then the first color was purple. It seems to be a color that I've been quite fond of, and it's been coming to me for the last month. So that came immediately, and then even before you said the second color, it was already ready because it was kind of like a yellowy kind of color coming in, and actually I was playing around with both of them. And then it turned into this emeraldy green one, and so I was quite happy with those colors. I don't see how they may not mesh together well, but they were nice. We're trying to see them as a flag, maybe what kind of flag they would make. Mm-hmm. And then the characters, the scarecrow came up right away, and so that was so obviously the connection with the intellect, and I was kind of concerned that he's straw and that he's kind of empty, but then the message that I got is like, no, it's actually quite solid because the straw isn't just straw. It's more he's more like a reed, he's more made of reeds, and then inside he's sort of kind of showed that he's actually quite strong and made of wrapped around this like steel kind of will, I guess. That's pretty cool. And then
So it surprised you. You
yeah.
that's interesting. You were thinking it's not as strong as it is. It's wispier, and it's like, oh well, there's more there than I thought.
Yeah,
Cool.
totally. And the second character was the Tin Man, and kind of and then I right away saw the connection why the two of them were there, because I was reading something, or maybe I've watched some sort of influential documentary about the trying to unify what the head wants and what the heart wants, and I've been struggling with the two kind of battling it out and not unifying their energy, and then at the same time they're both weakening each other. And here it was a very compassionate kind of hug that they gave to each other. And I was like, this is great. I hope this is a nice truce and kind of union of working together. And yeah, that was brilliant.
Nice. So not only did you get an image of the way things are, there was actually a shift that took place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and also surprisingly, because I don't even have to do anything. It just kind of happened. And I was like, sweet. I hope this is like a new level that will emerge.
Yeah, well, things will shift when we bring them into consciousness. Things can't happen if we're not doing it consciously. And doing an oscope, like they go in to look at yourself, to see these disparate parts. Sometimes that's enough to say, let them to actually do what they're wanting to do.
Yeah, and on our return trip back, there was the color was white, and that seemed, again, unity seemed to be like white unity, right? Rather than have everything spectrumed out and divided, so it was kind of going with the same theme of source and light and togetherness. And the follow-up colors were blue and then red. So I don't know if those you'll elaborate on the meaning of those, but
the wisdom of colors just comes. I don't interpret the colors particularly. Sometimes you can see patterns, but for the most part, they come spontaneous from the unconscious depths and with their own wisdom. How do you feel?
I guess the take-home was that there was some sort of transformation, from the colors they changed, and and the union with those two characters and stuff. So, and the revelations of what they actually are versus what I assumed. So that was pretty neat and surprising. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome, and thank you for sharing that and for doing that. And it does seem a reflection of the way you are, at least the little bit that I know of you. Like you're close to like securing higher level things within yourself, and like just the confidence to do that, and just like the little push to like, hey, I got more than I realized, and I can do more. But you're not quite in that groove yet. Like it's not like you're gonna have to have a major psychic makeover to get there. So very cool. Yeah, you look different too, energetically. Yeah, you notice that he's got a different energy about him. Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you're already connecting the dots with things going on outwardly. When you talk about social order and whatnot, and trying to figure that out, I think you're kind of concerned with that sort of thing in your outer life, and at the same time trying to sort it out in your inner life, and the two are mirroring each other. So the next step with the Oscope is that you take that information that you've got, and now you go out into Kansas and you apply yourself in new ways. You apply your will in a new way, or you get the will. You said you had the lion and the Tin Man working together. So, like more consciously, listening to those parts of yourself, and the Scarecrow too. He was off like in the distance. He wasn't even part of it really. It was like the passion of the heart and the drive of the will seem to be the guys that are center stage. So you try to more consciously get a balance of those, and then you do another Ozscope, in a week or 2 weeks or a month, and then you see what picture emerges then, which will be a reflection of what alchemical change you're able to bring through action in the world. Because that's really where we change ourselves, is out in Kansas. So live with that picture and see how that image speaks to you in terms of what's wanting in your soul and spiritual development, and see how you can change that picture. Yeah. There's a lot of information in there. I wish I could go more in detail with it, but yeah, maybe journal it at home, and then you have that as a benchmark, and then we could do another Ozscope later and see how it looks different. And this is really the road of self-initiation, because this is spiritual science, is self-initiation. When you start to live with this kind of consciousness of your inner and outer world, you really become empowered to be your own hierophant and initiate yourself. Like you get up in the morning and say, I'm going to transform my cowardly lion today. I'm going to work on making him more courageous, but not too willful, listening to the head and listening to the heart as well. And you really become your own overseer of your own initiation. And that's really what it's about today. Yeah. Now the next step is see, all right, where is your wicked witch? And where is your not so wonderful wizard? Because you have to deal with those. That's what's going to evolve you. You need to engage with those parts. And we didn't see those in anybody's Ozscope. We're just getting, the central characters in the field. Yeah, that's comes on the Yellow Brick Road. The wicked witch is that part that wants to disempower you, right? She came to Dorothy and said, give me those magic slippers, And Glinda said, don't take those magic slippers off. Their power must be very great. And so that wicked witch is always trying to get you to give up your power, trying to trick you any which way. And then the not so wonderful wizard is that part of life that's pretending to be something that it's not. Like he's hidden behind the curtain. The wicked witch is not hidden. It's very obvious, like she's out there trying to disempower us. It's trickier dealing with the not so wonderful wizard in some ways, because he pretends to be something that he's not, and he pretends to be something good. Like that's sometimes where we really get tricked. It was when things present themselves looking good, and we are naive about it and go, oh yeah, sure, I'll take this candy and go for a ride in this guy's car. That could get us into trouble, right? So, and where does the wicked witch and the not so wonderful wizard manifest in your outer life? Where are you dealing with those things in your outer life? And how does your lion and Tin Man and Scarecrow deal with those? And Dorothy, how does they deal with those in the outer life? So that would be the next step for Ozscope, is to see how you deal with these characters. Yeah.